HVAC 360, episode number 22. My interview with Kenny Tsakanikas. Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of HVAC 360. I am your host, Matt Nelson. Today, I have the pleasure of talking with Kenny Tsakanikas, who actually works for KT Consultants. Kenny has a long history in the HVAC field, both from the contractor's perspective and in the consulting arena. So, I just want to touch base with him, talk to him a little bit, and hopefully you can learn, a little bit about Kenny, and hope you enjoy the interview. All right, let's go to the tape. So today we're going to be talking with Kenny Tsakanikas. How you doing, Kenny?
I'm doing fine, thank you.
Now, Kenny, tell us a little bit about your background, what you've done in the industry.
Well, I started actually before high school, actually working in the weekends and in the summer with a small plumbing contractor that lived in the neighborhood. I used to go with him during the summer and then on the weekends to just do general maintenance that he did around the neighborhood, and in Silver Spring, Maryland, actually. And it was during high school I continued to do that. When I got out of high school, I went into the union pipe fitting union in Washington, D.C., and spent my apprenticeship as a pipe fitter and went into the plumbing field as well, eventually coming out of that and actually becoming a master plumber at age 23. I got my gas fitter's license, my HVAC license, etc. Worked in the field for about 8 years and worked my way into the office, at the same time going back to school at night to get a degree in business. So from the period of about 1974 to 1984, I spent crafting my field as a mechanical specialist, so to speak, mechanical plumbing, heating, air conditioning.
Now, is this, I mean, as far as, getting into, working for a plumber, I mean, was that more or less just a way to get money, or is that something that you were kind of inclined to do, early on?
I believe it's early on because it was interesting. I got interested. I had a good mechanical aptitude to begin with. I was always working on engines and motorcycles, and so the mechanical aptitude was there, and it was just something that it just was a natural fit for me working in the beginning there as a tradesman. I realized early on those cold mornings in January and February working on high-rise buildings downtown with the wind blowing at 25 miles an hour that maybe I should educate myself a little better and find a way to be one of those guys in the office. So I kind of worked my way, during my tradesman time to better myself so that I could become a little bit more successful and work my way into more of a supervisory role. That was my goal early on, and then I realized, during that process that, gee, I can see how it's done. Why don't I just do this for myself? So that being said, working for about 4 different large general mechanical contracting firms, eventually in 1989, I decided to go into business for myself.
Now, what kind of transition? I mean, that had to be something that was pretty scary. I just, I like to, analyze a little bit about that. What sort of, what was that transition like? I mean, what were you thinking at that time that, I guess just general feelings, and how did it go with you? I mean, did you have any sort of fallback plan, or did you have some, because I mean, obviously, as a consultant, there's a lot of, you basically, okay, if you have a computer and a brain, I think you're set, but there's not too much equipment. But going in as a contractor, I got to imagine that there's quite that, leap of faith where you're really kind of spreading yourself thin.
Yeah, there's a fear factor for anybody, especially young. I had young children at the time as well. My wife had a full-time job that paid just enough money to probably cover our bills, and whatever little savings I had accumulated, I went out and bought a van, and I developed a lot of relationships from the project management level and senior estimator level for some of the corporations I worked for. So the move to go to do the work wasn't as difficult as the fear factor of, that steady paycheck is gone, and now I've got to basically start from scratch. The other part of it, I think that a lot of tradesmen don't realize is the education part of it is so critical to, yes, you have to be a risk taker, I believe, and you have to believe in yourself, and a lot of those things are all, I think those are things that you acquire through education and being around the right people. But the other part of it is that the scary part you can overcome that with the right type of education, and I think, you got to be a risk taker, and it was a scary transition. The other part of it, I think, that a lot of people don't realize is that the work that I was doing as a general mechanical contractor, a senior project manager, and estimator was large work. Work that was $2, $3, $4, $5, $10 million jobs. When you go into business for yourself from scratch, you're not going to be doing those $2 to $10 million projects anymore. You're going to have to start small. So that transition was difficult. I was used to doing big work, and you can't finance big work right out of the block without any money. So I had to start by doing smaller projects and working my way up over a period of 20 years to get to a point to where it was the jobs that I was used to doing.
Now, did you manage to stay in commercial work, or did you have to? I mean, did you have to go into start residential, or what were some of the first jobs that you remember?
Well, I never got into. I did do a couple of large homes, but they were more of a commercial project than they were. When they have 40 and 50 tons of conditioning, I would consider that to be more of a commercial project. But my first couple of jobs, believe it or not, were like a Kmart store or a Walmart. And the only reason why I got those jobs is because the people that were building them were very comfortable with me and helped me finance my way through it by making sure they paid me on time. And it was just relationships that I had built up when I had worked for other companies with people that knew me and trusted me. And they kind of helped me along, and it got me going in the right direction. And became pretty successful over the years.
Now, how do you staff something like that when you're that small? Do you do it yourself, or you?
In the beginning, it was by myself, and then I went out and I hired an apprentice to work with me. And it was interesting. I was working during the day, sitting in the office at home at night till 10 or 11 o'clock. Estimating work, and then eventually hiring staff. I was able to secure enough work to where I could actually hire another mechanic and buy another truck, and it was all self-financed. The banks weren't lending any money to new upstart companies unless you had a lot of asset, and we didn't. So, it was a situation. It took a few years it took about 3 years to really get going. But it was a lot of work. It was a lot of hours, a lot of hard work.
Excellent. So what are some of the memorable projects that you remember from your contracting days? What were some of your favorites?
Good question. I had done a big automotive repair facility in Arlington, Virginia, years ago. That was just a great job. I did a few high-rise buildings down in D.C. That were just fabulous projects for the company. I did a Marriott downtown in Washington that I actually ended up going down, 10 years into the business and actually running the last half of the project myself. Did a couple of big elementary schools, a couple of big high schools over the years that turned out to be just fabulous projects. From a profit level standpoint and rewarding wise, different types of systems. I did some ice bank systems and some solar assisted heat recovery equipment and system. A bunch of really unique systems. As the new technology was coming out, of course, the counties and the municipal work were all about saving money, so they didn't have any problem going to the innovative designs. So there was a lot of interesting work we had done over the years, and a lot, very, very much rewarding because I got a chance to dip my hands in all different types of systems from a contracting standpoint. So it was that part of it was rewarding.
Yeah. So I guess what are some of the things that from a contracting standpoint that I guess were really valuable? What sort of lessons did you learn along the way from contracting?
Well, three items. One is technology. I went out very early on, back in 1993, after going to be in business for a little more than 3 years. Had decided that I needed to automate, and I went to Denver and trained a young lady that had been working with me from the beginning when I first opened an office outside of my own home, and bought the Quick Pen International estimating system, and spent time out there going through the training, and then coming back and implementing, which was nice. You could actually go into the software and input what you believe the labor should be for certain items, et cetera, and actually kind of bent the system a little bit to do it as I viewed the estimating and how I think it should be put together. It's a very flexible system. I think that was a big key. And then the people that I hired, I looked for guys that were the best at what they did. And I was very successful especially early on, with many of the guys that I hired. And then my brother, my older brother, Pete, had come into the business with me after the second year as well, which was a great field coordinator. I think it was just a combination of picking all the right guys and using the right technology. That helped a lot.
Now, I guess what did, as far as retaining, it's one thing to go and find, valuable employees, and it's another to be able to retain them. Was there anything special that you did to be able to retain your top talent?
Well, of course, you paid them bonuses based on their performance. If the guys performed at a high level, in addition to their salary, you gave them the perks, whether it would be a bonus or a vacation or an extra week's vacation, whatever it may be. Eventually, implementing, 401k plans, everything that somebody looking for a job would want in a company, health insurance, et cetera. We tried to expand over the years and give people that so that we were an attractive place to work.
So now you're in the business for 30 years. And you say, you know what, I've had enough of it. I'm going to become a consultant. What was that thought process like?
I think over the years, and we were in a niche. We were doing industrial and municipal work, quite a bit of it. A lot of plan and spec, and quite a bit. Probably the majority of our work was plan and spec. I'd say 70-75%. We only had about 25% of our work was negotiated. In the Washington, D.C. area, we used to call the area recession-proof. And to an extent, that was true. I'd gone through a couple of slowdown periods in the early 1990, 91, and also in the late 80s into the early 2000s was the same way. I think after spending the majority of my life, or 33 years, between tradesman and contractor, the stress and pressures of working these big projects and bonding them, I think over years, it took its physical toll In order for someone to have a business like this, you, besides having the right people, you have to spend a tremendous amount of time working it. And it's not that I lost my taste for the construction portion of it. I lost my taste for the aggravating parts. And I think that's something that after a few years of dealing with it, it's not that big a deal, but when you're dealing with it for 10 or 15 years, eventually I'm looking to move on to the next plateau. And I think that's one of the reasons why I decided that maybe my time might be better spent to downsize, do this for myself at an owner's level, and bring the experience that I've learned over the years in the contracting side to the owner side. I just thought it was a good move, and quite frankly, I can sleep well at night now. I think the things that we were talking about, it was a natural fit for me to move on. It was the same as starting out as a tradesman, working your way into a management position, going in business for myself, working that for 22 years in business for myself. I think it was a natural succession to move on. It was just the right thing for me individually. It may not be for others, but for me, I thought it was the right move, and so far, I haven't been wrong yet. So I look at it as it's a good move for me.
You have good instincts.
Yeah.
So I guess what kind of consulting are you involved with? How would you describe it?
I had put together, and there's other people that are doing the same thing that I am. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's not like I created a new niche. I like to use the term ORM, which is known as ORM, which is Owner's Representation Management. From a consulting, let's say from a developer's side or an owner's side, provide them with job management, whether it be helping them with contracts, negotiations, putting together design teams, putting together the right design teams with the right engineers based on the type of project, and then helping them through the critical phases of getting started, and then managing the project and helping them close it out, et cetera, including, quality control and CX if necessary. So the way I look at it, owner's representation is probably our strongest suit, my strongest suit. And then probably about a third of what we do is, CX and validation of systems from a mechanical and electrical standpoint. That's probably the other third. I'd say it's about a 66-33 deal as far as how what I try to do. And, that could also help insurance companies. I can help insurance companies with claims. I can help contractors with claims. We have some experts that work here with me and the team that I put together. There's some pretty strong individual players that are trade specific. Some are just nothing but trades, delay claim specialists. Some are scheduling specialists. Some are electrical specialists. I have the mechanical and general construction, and I have guys that are concrete specialists. In other words, the team of guys that I put together with my company are all independents, but they all work under the same umbrella and work for themselves as well. But I bring them with me on projects where their specific trade is a plus that helps the situation or whatever the owner may need.
Mm-hmm. Now, do you separate out quality control as a separate service, or is it pretty much just a either commissioning or you're going to be an owner's rep?
Well, there's quality control is different than commissioning. Quality control is more about defect discovery and reporting, more in the level of job management and competence. Where CX is different. CX is more about validation of systems, and compliance of design. Testing for and moreover performance testing, and then report the accuracy of the performance testing. I mean that's what to me commissioning is. Where quality control is more about defect discovery, and then reporting of it, and then getting it resolved.
Mm-hmm.
And it's actually slightly different. I think that the two of them are different animals. Although they do have parallel paths in some situations, but they are definitely two separate functions, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. So, as far as an owner's rep goes, what are some of those? And I gotta ask this. Typically, when I see owners reps, it's some version of a CM. Rarely do I, construction management or some sort of general contractor that gets into this. I mean, I guess rarely do I see somebody who's like, you know what, I'm an owner's rep. That's what I do. I don't do any of the project management. I mean, how does one, come upon doing just that?
Well, you're right. There is a difference. A construction manager normally is handed a project after it's designed. It's basically, here's your plans, here's your specs, have at it. A construction manager is, in many ways, is just a step up from being a general contractor. It's just the actual supervision of it. In reality, a construction manager most likely will be using the same subcontractors, if you're doing like a CM job, that the general contractor would be using in the same neighborhoods, in the same areas. So it's an extended arm. It's maybe a half a step up from being a general contractor, a CM is, where a owner's representation is in at the ground floor before the design team is picked, before the working with the finances and working with the acquisition of property and putting together the master schedule of how the process is going to go. And then I'm not saying that owner's representation doesn't include project management. It does, if that's the level that the owner wants. I've actually done work with the owner just at the design phase and the actual contract phase, and then he's had his own people take it from there on a project management level. So in other words, an owner's rep can actually come in many different areas. I've actually done owner's representation to a point where I've just been contracted to look at change orders, for instance, where they send change orders, almost like change order review. But that's another form of not actually managing the project, but managing a piece of the project or a portion of it. So I think owners' reps are more ground level, infancy stage in the planning and putting together the actual project from the owner's perspective than it is in actual construction management.
What is the difference between a good owner's rep and somebody who isn't so good?
I think it's knowledge, understanding the process, and the other part of it is I think a lot of times you have to specialize to an extent, and then for an owner's rep, depending on the project, I wouldn't be the guy that could come in and do a nuclear power plant. Although I have worked on them before, but that was from a tradesman standpoint. You have to really specialize. I think you specialize in fields that or particular types of projects that you're most familiar with, and I think that the team that you put around that has to have that same type of ability to work on, to be more job specific. I think that's the key to it. Because really, in reality, all owner's representation is a process. It's setting the model. It's actually designing the model and then implementing the model. It's really it's a management process. It comes down to that. I think choosing what's the difference between a good one and a bad one? I think the bad ones don't get much work, and the good ones do. I think, it's all about how it's set up in the beginning, and then how it's implemented. and I think a bad owner's rep, it's hard for me to describe. A bad ones are the ones that don't get much work down the road. They do one or two projects, and then their reputation gets tarnished, and it's over.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but most of these, I could imagine that there's not really a certification, so to speak, to kind of help owners determine whether or not it's a good or a bad. It's more or less just experience and references that you'd go in with.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. I think look, there's a lot of consulting companies out there. A lot of them are an arm of an architectural firm or even an engineering firm that offer project management, construction management, owner's representation as a specialty or in addition to what they already do, which is architecture. I'm not saying that architects don't make good project managers, but good project managers don't make good architects. So I kind of go in reverse. I actually go the opposite. Am I saying that contractors or former contractors make the best owner's reps? All depends on the individual. It really has a lot to do with that and your experiences. And I think from a contracting standpoint, how do I help an owner better so than maybe an architect? Contractors are managers. Architects are designers. I think that's the best way to. I'm not saying that there isn't some designers that haven't been contractors either, but what I'm trying to say is that they're individual fields. I think a contractor has the actual hands-on management experience, where an architect spends his primary function is in design. So I think there is a difference between the two.
Yeah. I'm actually a firm believer in that there should be some sort of job exchange program between people in the field and people that are designers, engineers, architects that would really kind of help develop a better type of construction industry.
I don't disagree at all. I think there should be. I think there should be I'll give you an example. On some of the lead requirements, when I went to NABB to try to get my lead certification for commissioning, even though I am a master HVAC, refrigeration, master plumber, gas fitter, journeyman electrician, I have all these different licenses. It didn't qualify me to even take their test in which to get that certificate, because I had not worked as a TAB contractor or as a TAB technician for the 7,000 hours. I forget what the requirements were. Mm-hmm. But there were requirements there that I couldn't meet unless I decided to go to work as a TAB guy or worked under one for a couple of years. It's almost like the CX was in some certification from the lead standpoint that even the federal government accepts, requires a certain type of background, preferably from the testing, adjusting, and balancing industry, which to me is almost like an extended arm of a TAB, where what makes them more qualified than me,
right?
If you know what I'm going to say. And I think it's a bunch of well, let's just say I don't agree with it. That's wrong.
Okay. Now, I guess from an owner's rep standpoint, do you have any examples of things that you've identified early on that could have potentially been, huge problems?
From an owner's rep standpoint?
Sure.
An owner's representative on the owner's behalf, the most important part of our job is to manage the owner's expectations. The other part of it is just trying to get the owner to give you a level of autonomy that allows you to make the important decisions for them. A lot of times you have owners that are They want to be involved, but they want to be involved, for a lot of the wrong reasons. I think the potential problems you have are when owners have a preconceived or predetermined path of who the design team may be, who they want to do their design. That may not be the right fit, and the potential problems come when that can be headed off is when you can convince an owner, this is a great architect for this type of building or this type of project, but this is a better architect and a better mechanical engineer. So there is, that's where I've had potential problems where it's basically been disagreements, emphatic disagreements over who the design team should include, which particular firms. Mm-hmm. And I've been able to head off a few of those. And the same thing with contractor selection. Same exact thing. They're looking for dollars and cents, which is my job is to help them find the right dollars and cents to build. In other words, don't pay too much, but at the same time, don't put an unqualified contractor on a job that requires a different sort of contractor, if you know what I mean.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. So now, how does your experience as an owner's rep, help you in commissioning?
How does it help me in commissioning?
Yeah. Or does it at all? Or
well, not really. I mean, I convince the majority of the owners that I have worked for that they should have a commissioning process. A lot of them think it's, the contractor does it. Well, the problem with that, depending on, if it's a very simple system, it doesn't have a lot of bells and whistles, I tend to agree with them. We're going to do, as an owner's rep, if I'm doing the PM part of it, anyway, the quality control is involved. We're involved with that anyway. However, I convince the owners that the jobs that require a lot more, that are a lot more involved, that they should have a commissioning process. It should be part of the contract. I believe it's a requirement. It should be a third party. I've always believed in third party. I don't believe in letting the general contractor do it themselves. They're handpicked. I think the owner should pick the actual CX company.
Now, on a lot of your projects, does it turn out that you start out as the owner's rep, and then they just work you in as the commissioning agent, or is that is all your commissioning work separate from your owner's representation?
I've actually done it both ways. I've actually included that as part of our work, and I've actually given the owner the option to go outside and hire an actual third party, a separate company to do it. I've also asked that the owners put in their specifications the whole CX section. And you're seeing that a little bit more now with municipal and county and federal government jobs, where you're actually seeing the CX have an actual whole separate division. I'm finding that the majority of the CX work is more on the mechanical, electrical, and control side, and not as much on the actual building itself. But on what I call the critical systems, mechanical, electrical, plumbing, and the AS automation. I find that to be the place where I've seen it the most anyway, or at least that's the ones that go into detail. But you don't see it that much on buildings. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. There are buildings that have full CX. But the majority of what I see is division, which I call 15, 16, 17.
Right. Now, I guess you've done some kind of mission-critical commissioning projects.
Right.
How would you differentiate those from your more standard projects that you've worked on? Well,
the difference between a standard project and mission-critical project, it really isn't so much about redundancy. We're mission-critical. It's about the guarantee, built not to fail. and then if one system fails, the next system takes over. A minimal chance of failure. That's the difference in the redundancy. So mission critical is all about guarantees. It's about it's a lot more involved. Every system is checked again, double checked, and checked from so many different angles and processes to ensure that the multiple systems are in place and that the design is built not to fail. And then you test that. I mean, I think it's a lot more involved.
Now, what is the most complicated mission critical system that you've commissioned?
I've done some systems where they've had multiple redundancies. You have 500 tons of conditioning for a 60,000 square foot space, and two actual redundancies where you have one chiller and 500 tons and 2 pumps, to 3 chillers, 1,500 tons, 6 pumps, and then have a 100% free air cooling and an evaporative, indirect evaporative system as another backup, additional generators, automatic changeover transformers, all kinds of interesting combinations of systems where I've had not just chilled water systems, but evaporative cooling and even DX backup as well in one building.
Now,
to make sure it doesn't go down, they have their backups were, what is it, N2+1?
Yeah.
That's it. Just very, very, very involved, and a BAS system that monitors every little process, right down to amps, right down to actual barrel pressure in the chiller barrels, down to the actual temperature of the oil inside the chiller barrels. Mm-hmm. Very, very extensive testing procedure and monitoring systems. To watch every little thing with multiple alarms. Interesting stuff.
So have you ever had a catastrophic failure of any piece of equipment that you've been testing?
None to date. I've read quite a bit on mission critical data news that comes out daily about lightning strikes and then losing utility power, and then the backup system didn't come on, and they don't know why. And those are the things that during the CX that I have done on these mission critical projects, we take into account. We try to invent, basically make sometimes our own scripts on how we want things to shut down, and then actually to time the sequencing between one failure and the next system picking up, and we'll fail that system and see if the other one comes back. We do it, we call it forward and reverse. Take it from this end to the other end and backwards, and we do it more than once to make sure that it's commissioned properly. So there's a lot of I've never had that on the projects that I have done, at least none to date. That doesn't mean it couldn't happen. I have not had that experience. Excellent.
So now you are currently working. We kind of beat around the bush a little bit. You currently work for who? CT Consultants?
KT Consultants.
Oh, KT. Sorry, KT Consultants.
Mm-hmm.
And their specialty, I think you'd mentioned that was the
owner's representation and management. Yeah.
Okay, excellent. Now, if people wanted to get a hold of you, what's the best way to do that?
They can get me through my website, which is ktconsultantonline.com, or they can contact me directly by telephone here in Florida, 954-775-4595.
Okay, and if you didn't catch that, I will post that on the show notes at buildingx.co. So I really appreciate you taking the time here, Kenny. to talk with us and kind of give us a great little background and story about who you are and what you've been through. So I appreciate you taking the time today.
Thank you so much for involving me. I appreciate that very much.
All right, and we're back. Again, I really appreciate Kenny Tsakanikas taking the time to sit down and talk with us. It was really a pleasure to get to know Kenny a little bit more. Again, I love just calling around and talking with some of the veterans of the industry to really get their history, their background. There's so much that we can learn and take away from what they've done already. So I hope you enjoy that, and I hope you got something out of it. If you did, please go ahead and forward this on to other people that you know. A lot of times, I think the people that are listening to the show, you especially, are very you're the top 3%. I've said that before. You're the top 3% of the HVAC industry. You're the people who are actually going out, learning a little bit more, and on your own to further yourself, and worldwide. And I think that there's so many of our, so many of our peers that don't necessarily do that. That aren't even aware that shows like the HVAC 360 podcast is out there. That just make it your mission today to share it with at least one other person. And I greatly appreciate that. If you have, as usual, if you have any show suggestions or you have any comments or feedback, you can reach me at matt@buildingx.co, or you can just join me, send me friend me at LinkedIn, or follow me on Twitter at BuildingCX. So I guess that's pretty much it. Thanks for listening, and remember, always know what you build and share what you know.